Hello and welcome to the latest DayZ Devblog. Been a while since the last one, so hopefully this offers a good little update. One of the areas that we've been quite keen to work on is actually the lighting inside DayZ. Not just from a visual standpoint, but for important gameplay purposes as well, as playing at night at the moment is not so good because there hasn't really been many options. Here you can see we've actually enabled the lighting from the flashlight to actually work during the day. Previously in Arma, point source and beam lights, like this flashlight's a beam light, they didn't actually work during the daytime, and that was quite a limitation for players. There was no feedback for them as to why their torch wasn't showing and that kind of thing. So we think that's quite an important change from a gameplay standpoint, and once we've actually tidied up how HDR is working so that your screen is actually being adjusted correctly for the lighting, I think that's going to make a big improvement. So you can see here as the character's running around there, the HDR definitely needs a lot of tweak. There's been a lot of discussion about this online, and we're really committed to improving the HDR. I think that will have a big impact on how the player plays at night and also how they'll play during the day. So we're pretty excited to see how that's going to develop, and I look forward to having that in some of the patches coming out soon. Physics has been an area that we've been really excited to actually put in the game. We've added a new middleware to the game, to the engine, that didn't exist before, and this is really allowing us to do a lot of what you're seeing here. Sometimes you can see I'm slowing the time down here so that you can actually get a better view of how the items are interacting with the world. It's been a long time coming for us to actually get physics middleware in game, so we've been pretty excited to see some of the early results from it. This will actually allow us to improve huge areas of the game, stretching from, as you can see here, throwing items, whether they be throwing them to injure another player or throwing them to your buddy so that he can catch the magazine, that kind of stuff. But it's also going to allow us to look at things like ragdoll, to look at changing the way that the character is actually moved in the world. And this helps us improve a great deal of things, the controls and all this. I must stress though that it's still fairly early days for us. We've been pretty close to pushing it to experimental a few times, but it's mainly dealing with the many crashes and things like that appear. We're trying to do this physics, which seems like it's a relatively simple thing. Having to do it on a server, particularly one that's on a very large map, is problematic, particularly when we've been having bandwidth problems as it is. So, we're going to be really excited to push this into experimental and have people test it. We need to expand on the concept, allowing people to hit other people, with the items that they're throwing, that kind of thing. But it's really coming along, and you can see from the videos that we're showing here that it's really starting to look good. The physics items actually have their own materials as well, and different materials react in different ways. It's been very hard to unify all this together with how materials are used existing in the game at the moment, particularly in terms of penetration and that. So it's really been a big effort. This has been at least 6 months worth of solid work for Yana, one of our programmers, and she's pretty excited about seeing how the players use this, but it's really going to be a big test on the server to see how the servers actually handle it. So yeah, we're pretty excited about how this is developing. Another area of work has actually been containers that I've talked about before. So here you can actually see a refrigerator that you can actually interact with. We're looking at redoing some of the models of these, the refrigerator, so that you can actually look at them, open the doors, that kind of thing, and actually interact with the items inside it. I think that's going to really help with giving some more depth to how our loot and our loot system works. One of our new programmers, he's been working on Basically, the older people will remember from the mod, we had a system of you actually being able to see arrows and things like that, and crossbow bolts that actually been shot into players, animals, zombies, that kind of thing. So this has been something we were all quite keen on. We really want to see the hunting aspect of DayZ really expanded. So the bow and arrow is actually in active development. What you're seeing here is a very early work in progress of how it's going to work. But yeah, we're very excited. The progress with this has been quite fast. Here you can actually see some of how the ballistics of arrows are being tweaked. You can actually see the, and I think I switched the textures off here. You can actually see the bow actually deflecting off the ground, say again the arrow deflecting off the ground and actually bouncing up. So there's some really exciting stuff happening with the bow and arrow. We look forward to having more in the future. Victor's been really pushing the animators, making sure that we can actually get some new transitions, new ways for our two-handed and one-handed animations to work. So this is very much a work in progress. They've still got a lot of polish that they want to do, but we've moved away from the old way the animations were working, which caused all our players to be doing left-handed swings. It was very restrictive as to the positioning of how the melee items were actually held and how the attacks were performed. Because the hit detection is based on the position of the item, it meant that it was very important then for the pose of the character and how they were moving, how the player would tell where they were going to hit. So we're quite confident that a lot of these changes and replacements of all these animations, it's quite a sweeping change, will drastically improve the way that the player handles melee and how they feel with it. So I think some of these improvements will really help, and it is going to be a while before we see all these fully polished and in-game, but we're looking forward to players' feedback in the experimental branch. The map's been seeing a lot of updates. Our map designers under Senchi actually working with our artists to get some of the new buildings in game. Mario's been really busy going through, tidying everything up, fixing bugs, collision issues, all that kind of stuff. So this is the new police station, which is all over the map, and there's a whole bunch of work on some of the new towns. We really kind of just want to leave that as a bit of a surprise for people, together with some of the new buildings that will be appearing in the game, so people can actually go through and have a look around the map and experience some of the new and exciting stuff. This is the health center, which is, I guess, another one of our key features, sort of new buildings. We've got a lot of other stuff planned. People have heard us talk about the prison and castle and things like that in the past, so this is certainly not the last or even maybe the bulk of the new buildings that we have planned. We've certainly got some really good work coming out of the map designers working together with the artists to really just add a bit more flavour and give DayZ that real lived-in Churnerous experience, and so people are going to be able to explore and search for new areas. One of our biggest issues is mainly getting loot to spawn in all the buildings, so that is something that we've been actively working on as well. We really wanted the weather and the environment in general to be a real, almost like an antagonist for the player. So one thing we've been working on is actually improving how the rain works. So the cool thing is the rain and weather completely is now properly synchronized across all clients. So if it's starting to rain on your screen, then it's starting to rain on the other players' screens on the server. And this is the first time it's actually been done in this series. You can see here that the player that's on the screen is actually getting damp and wet. So their items can actually get damp. This doesn't really have much effect at the moment, but over time it's going to be growing to affect the items. Different items have different like absorbency values, raincoats will help, that kind of thing. So it's still very early days, but it's an example of how we want to make the environment become much more important. And when we get campfires and things like that, it also becomes very important. You can see we're trying to provide a little bit more feedback to the players about whether they've got injuries as well. We're also preventing players from doing things like vaulting in that, which is a lot of bug fixing coming in that area too. Now this is a bit I really was excited about introducing, because we haven't really talked a lot about it, but basically we really want to add in hunting. and really good, awesome mechanics for cooking, because I think that's a really massive part of the game. It's an area that expanded a little bit with the mod, but we really didn't quite get to visit as much as we want. So I think this is going to be really exciting. We've got actually a whole team of programmers, designers, and artists entirely new to the team with a very big experience in making hunting games. They've joined specifically to create the animals, their behaviors, and how hunting works. So this is really quite a massive deal. It's basically an entire group of people who are going to be dedicated to making hunting and animals work in the game. So they're also going to be looking at zombie hit detection and the buildings and things like that. So it's really quite a massive deal for us. We're looking at really just maximizing the element of survival in the game, and I think actually hunting animals and finding food is really going to be something else. That's actually the focus for our current sprint now. So the next 2 weeks is going to see massive development on cooking, on and then later on in the weeks following in hunting. We're looking at doing now, we've got kind of the gas canister kind of working, but we really want to move on and look at campfires and see how those relate to the player getting warm, how that relates to the player actually cooking their items, the meat spoiling and all that kind of thing. So we've got some quite exciting plans. Been playing a lot of Project Zomboid to get a lot of inspiration. So yeah, we're really excited. This is something that it's like something completely new that we're able to look at with DayZ that we weren't able to look at with the mod in anywhere near this depth. So I think it's going to be pretty awesome, and so we look forward to showing that off to people in the patches. One of the big problem areas that users have been reporting has been desync. This is mainly manifested not just in you seeing that you've got desync in the gameplay menu, but actually in some really gameplay breaking problems where you can't play with your friends, and it was quite heartbreaking to read some of the problems experienced on the forums. So I actually worked with some of the forum members, sat down with our programmers, and we diagnosed some of what the problem is. A large part of the problem is actually the amount of bandwidth that DayZ is using. This is because it's sending non-guaranteed updates for a lot of the inventory items. So if you have a lot of inventory items on you or someone nearby you does, it means that all these messages are being sent and they have to be spammed because the server doesn't know whether or not the client has received them. We're actually working on this, and we've got a few hot fixes in place that we're testing now, but the long-term approach, and by long-term I mean really a matter of weeks, is that we move to a guaranteed message system for inventory updates, which means the server can send the message once, it doesn't have to send it constantly. So we're really confident this is going to make a big difference for those experiencing desync problems. I think it's going to be an ongoing effort, but I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to push these updates back to the community, and some of those who are having terrible problems will actually be able to get some good result. This is an example of some of the really good feedback we've got from the community on these bugs and how really targeting those issues we're able to get some results. So we're looking forward to pushing forward on that and getting feedback as to how successful we have actually been. I guess saving the biggest and best questions until last. The thing everybody wants to know about is, where are the zombies? It's called DayZ. Zombies aren't plentiful. One of the problems with this is we don't have respawning zombies currently in the build. It's been something we've been working on. We'd initially been focused more on a lot of other things, but this has been an area of active development. That's not just the respawning of the zombies, but also the respawning of the loot. I guess tied closely with this is things like collision detection for the zombies and doors, their pathfinding and that. That's also been an ongoing area of work. And the new team, as I mentioned before, who's dealing with the animals, very big team, they will actually also be looking at the hit detection for the zombies inside buildings and with buildings and objects. So that's an exciting area. In terms of the actual numbers themselves, we are actively working on the zombie respawn mechanics using some of the optimization methods we use for actually player spawns. So I'm confident we'll be seeing some of the results of that flowing into experimental very soon. Ideally, we would actually see some of these flowing into the stable update. The next one is due actually in, it goes into experimental in 2 weeks' time, and then hopefully it'll only spend another week in experimental before we see it out in stable and everyone's playing it. So I think that's good. It's maybe not as fast as we'd want with the zombies, the progress, but I think the important thing is that we make sure that we're creating a really robust experience with the respawning zombies. We don't want them spawning straight in front of a player. We actually want the mechanics to be sensible. So if a player has taken over a village, that the zombies are actually spawning outside and maybe being attracted to the village based on noise. Very difficult to get that right in this kind of open world environment, so that's kind of why it's taking us a bit of time. We really felt it's important to do it properly and do it well. One aspect that we've actually been actively developing as well, but I don't really have any images to show, is the persistent objects. Previously in the mod, that was things like the tents that you could put items in around the world. We're actually currently experimenting right now, it's actually been done and completed, with persistent objects based on backpacks. So we're having those as a persistent object. We're also looking at having items like paper and wood once barricading comes in, that kind of thing, to be persistent. So once you put a barricade on a window, then it'll actually stay exactly where it is when the server restarts. So that's actively in testing, that's coming in. Once we finish that and everything else that I've listed in the Devblog so far, that's when we're going to start looking at things like vehicles. That's when we're going to start looking at obviously expanding on the barricade aspects and things like that. So I appreciate people really want to see the vehicles come in, but we think it's really important that we hone in and polish off the existing survival mechanics we have before we introduce vehicles, which then could sort of upset the balance and change everything else. In terms of the vehicles, the initial implementation will see us implementing more slower vehicles. So for example, bicycles, things like that. Then when we actually look at the vehicles themselves proper, we really want to do them as if you can actually change many of the components of them. So they're really an advanced, almost end game type item. We're actually going to be worrying about the battery, spark plugs, all these kinds of details. So you'll actually be constructing your vehicle out of the parts you find around, and if you have breakdowns, you'll need to fix them again. Future devlogs will start to look into a bit more and show some more detail, but you know, it's something that's definitely started to appear on our radar now, and we're actively thinking about it. So thanks very much for watching the devblog, and we look forward to pushing it out to experimental so people can experiment with where we're at now.